بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Moving forward with our lessons on the introduction to the Arabic language. Yesterday we covered مضاف مضاف إليه, and in the class prior to that we covered الجار والمجرور, and we explained both of these roles in detail, as well as the rules that govern them, and we applied role position reflection to a few verses. Today, be moving on with the work I assigned you in the previous class. And like I mentioned, I want everyone to have this work done prior to coming to class. If you're watching the recording and you haven't finished the work yet, take out some time, try answering the questions, and then you can attend class. Now, so for exercise number one, we had words, and we want to add حروف الجر, الحروف الجارة, to those words, and then apply role position reflection. مفتاح means a key. Okay, we're going to add any of the حروف الجر. Now, obviously, depending on which حرف الجر you add, the meaning will change. I've added إلى over here. If you add a different حرف الجر, you will have a different meaning. So you can use any حرف الجر you want. If I chose a specific حرف الجر, use a different حرف الجر, that's not a mistake. That is completely fine. But in terms of the effect that حرف الجر has, you have to ensure that effect remains the same. So to explain this, إلى is a حرف الجر. We added to the word مفتاح. مفتاح becomes مفتاحين. Meaning becomes to a key. Application of role position reflection, because مفتاح is coming after a jar. Remember, we told you that the حروف الجارة, الحروف الجارة are also known as الجار. We have a jar over here, which is basically a jar giver. Because the word miftah is coming after a jar, it is in the role of majroor. And I explained to you that the role of majroor is in the position of jar, which is reflected by a kasra. Okay. Aliman means a scholar. Min alimin, from a scholar. From a scholar. Over there, that min is a harf al jar. And therefore, it's jar. Alimin is majroor, and majroor is a role that falls under jar, the position of jar. And jar is reflected oftentimes by a kasra. Over here, there's no alif lam and alimin. There's no alif lam. That's why we have a tanween at the end. Alimin. Narun means a fire. Fi means in. Fi narin, in a fire. In a fire. And that fi is a harful jar. That's what we refer to as jar. Again, harful jar and jar are synonymous. Whether you say jar or you call it a harful jar, I don't mind. Okay. Jar, narin is majrur. Majrur is a role that falls in the position of jar. And the position of jar is often reflected by a kasrah. Over here, we don't have an alif lam, so there's kasratain. Very simple and very easy, right? As-sanamu means the idol. As-sanamu means the idol. Ala means on. Ala sanami, on the idol. So ala is a harf al-jar. We can refer to that as jar. As-sanami is the majrur. Majrur is a role that falls in the position of jar. And jar is reflected by kasra. Hence the kasra at the end. Notice as-sanami has an alif lam, and therefore we only have one kasra on the word sanam. And the meaning is the idol, as opposed to any idol. Al-waladu means the child. Min al-waladi, you can apply jar majrur by yourself. Min is harf al-jar or jar. Al-waladi is majrur, and majrur is a role that falls under the position of jar, and jar is reflected by a kasra. All right. Exercise number 2 is a mudaf mudaf ilay exercise. So number 1, the house is key. Whenever you have a mudaf mudaf ilay in front of you, I want you to determine first what's the mudaf, what's the mudaf ilay. The house is key. What's the possessed? What's the possessor? So when we use the English phrase of the possessive phrase with an apostrophe s, I told you when you use an apostrophe s in the English language, the possessor comes first, and then the possessed. So house is actually the mudaf ilay, right? Because it's the possessor. The key belongs to the house. And I told you if it comes before the apostrophe s, that's the possessor, and the second word will be the mudaf. This is as opposed to saying the key of the house. If you use a different phrase in English, the key of the house, now the first word is the possessed, the key, and the house is the possessor. Okay? Now let's apply. Now that we know our mudaf and mudaf ilayh. Let's apply the rules. If you were to say baytu miftahin, if you were to say baytu miftahin, that would be incorrect. Why? Because rule number 1 is not applicable. What's rule number 1? Mudaf comes first, mudaf ilayh comes second. Over here, we told you that the mudaf is the key. And the mudaf ilayh is the house. So bayt means house. That's not supposed to come first. That needs to be coming second. This word baytu miftahin, it means a key's house. Like the house belongs to the key. That's not what we're saying. We're saying the key belongs to the house. Okay? So baytu miftahin, if you're translating the house's key, that would be incorrect. Al miftahu baytin. Now we've changed the order, so rule number 1 is good to go. Okay? But there's an issue. Rule number 2 is mudaf cannot have alif lam or tanween. And clearly there's a tanween over here. There's an alif lam over here, afwan. So that is incorrect. And number 3, what if you said miftahu baytin? Miftahu baytin, a house's key. Now, in terms of the rules of mudaf ilayh, this is correct. Rule number 1, mudaf comes first, miftah is coming first, mudaf ilayh comes second, bayt is coming second. Rule number 2, mudaf cannot have alif lam or tanween. Rule number 3, mudaf ilayh is in the position of is the role that falls under the position of jar, and jar is reflected by a kasra. So in terms of the rules of mudaf ilayh, that's correct. But in terms of translation, this means a house's key. I wanted the house's key. That's why the correct phrase is miftahul bayti. Mudaf ilay over here, houses, it needs to be specific. Remember, I told you that even though mudaf cannot have alif lam or tanween, mudaf ilay can. Mudaf ilay can have alif lam or tanween. So miftahul bayti, that is the correct phrase. E scholars, pen. So number 1, what's the mudaf? What's the mudaf ilay? Once again, the pen is the mudaf, the scholar is the mudaf ilay, the pen belongs to the scholar. Okay, the pen is the possessed, the scholar is the possessor. Therefore, if you say alimu qalamin, rule number 1 is not being applied because we told you mudaf, the possessed has to come first. You have to invert alim and qalam. Qalam. Then if you say qalamun alimin, rule number 2 is broken because rule number 2 is the mudaf cannot have alif lam or tanween. And that word has a tanween. But if you say qalamun alimun, qalamun or qalamu, afwan, qalamu, so you drop the alif lam from the mudaf and you drop the tanween. Perfect, right? But you said alimun. That's a mistake. Why is that a mistake? Because we told you that the mudaf ilayhi, rule number 3, is in the position of jar, and jar is reflected by kasra. Therefore, the correct phrase is qalamu alimin, not alimun, qalamu alimin. Naam. A pen of a child. A pen of a child. What if someone was to say al qalamu waladin? Over here we say that look, you got the mudaf alayhi order right. Rule number 1 is good because the pen belongs to the child. The pen belongs to the child. And you'll notice over here in English, over here we're using the of, right? If you're using the of, this particle, over here the mudaf comes first. And the mudaf ilayh comes second. In English as well. If you're using an apostrophe s, then in that scenario the mudaf ilayh comes first. In that scenario the mudaf ilayh comes first, and the mudaf comes second. Over here, because we're using of, a pen, that's the mudaf. If we say qalam, and then a of a child belongs to the child is mudaf ilayh. Al qalamu waladin, even though the order is correct, rule number 1 is good to go. The issue over here is that you added an alif lam to the mudaf. You added an alif lam to the mudaf, and therefore, this would be incorrect on account of rule number 2 not being followed. Qalamul waladi, on account of the rules of mudaf ilayh is correct, but the translation is incorrect. Because I don't want the child's pen, I want a pen of a child. If you add an alif lam to al walad, that becomes the child's pen. That's not what we're looking for, right? So the correct phrase over here is qalamu waladin. Qalamu waladin. Okay. The idol's seller. This is a bit interesting, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a few mistakes over here. The idol seller. The issue over here is the first thing you have to determine is what's the mudaf, what's the mudaf ilayh. If you can't determine that, you will make a mistake. I told you when you're using an apostrophe s, when you're using an apostrophe s in English, the possessor comes first, meaning the mudaf ilayh comes first, and the mudaf comes second. Using an apostrophe s, you have to remember this. Okay, when you say the man's key, the key belongs to the man. Likewise, when you say the idol seller, what's being said over here is that the seller belongs to the idol. Normally, when you think about this, you would think it means the idol belongs to the seller. But this specific phrase in front of us doesn't mean that. The phrase over here means the seller is being attributed to the idol, not the other way around. So it's not, for instance, the idol of the seller, that the idol belongs to the seller. Rather, it's the seller of the idol. The seller belongs to the idol. Now, obviously, in terms of possession, you might think that doesn't make sense. But when we translate mudaf, mudaf ilayh is possessed and possessor, this is just to make things easier. Generally speaking, this phrase includes a possessed and a possessor, but not all the time. Like over here, the idol belongs to the seller. But that English over there, the idol's seller, we switched the order. We said that the seller belongs to the idol. That is what's being said over there. Because I told you the apostrophe S enters upon the mudaf ilay in English. In English, the apostrophe S enters upon the mudaf ilay. Therefore, the idol is the mudaf ilay. The seller is the mudaf. How do you say idol? Sanam. How do you say seller? Ba'i'. Now that we know the mudaf and we know the mudaf ilay, we can actually move on to applying the rule over here. And we can bring the mudaf first. If you said sanamul ba'i'i, you made a mistake. Why? Because sanam is the idol. We told you in this scenario, the idol's buyer, because the idol is coming before the apostrophe S, that word over there is actually the mudaf ilay. If sanam is the mudaf ilay, what's rule number one of mudaf ilay? The mudaf needs to come first, the mudaf ilay needs to come second. Okay, this actually means the seller's idol. This doesn't mean the idol seller, it means the seller's idol, which meaning wise can be correct. In terms of meaning, sanam al ba'i is correct. Like the idol can belong to a seller. Nothing wrong with that. But the sentence we're translating, or the phrase to be exact, which we're translating, does not translate to the seller's idol. We are looking for the idol's seller. So the correct phrase over here is actually ba'i'u sanami. Ba'i'u, does mudaf comes first. Mudaf ilay comes second. Mudaf cannot have alif lam, cannot have tanween. The mudaf ilay is a role that falls in the position of jar, and jar is reflected by a kasra. Now, in this specific example, if you didn't understand it entirely, don't worry about it. It's alright. Just keep in mind that you have to translate accurately. And later on, when you cover this again and again, you will get the hang of this, as well as when you see it being applied quite a bit. You'll get the hang of it. Finally, knowledge of a believer. Knowledge of a believer. So what's the mudaf? Mudaf is knowledge, because we told you when you use the of, the mudaf comes first, mudaf ilayh comes second. The knowledge belongs to the believer. Knowledge of a believer. Knowledge is mudaf, believer is mudaf ilayh. If you said ilmunil mu'mini, the tanween on the word ilm, that's a mistake because mudaf cannot have alif lam or tanween. If you said ilmul mu'mina, that's a mistake because mudaf ilayh is a role that falls under the position of jar. If you said ilmul mu'mini, now you're close over here, but there's an issue. If you say ilmul mu'mini, the meaning becomes knowledge of the believer or the believer because you added an alif lam to the mudaf ilayh. And that's a correct mudaf ilayh phrase. Nothing wrong with that. But we're translating knowledge of a believer. Therefore, the correct way to say this is ilmu mu'minin. Ilmu mu'minin. Rule number one, mudaf comes first, mudaf ilayh comes second. Rule number two, mudaf cannot have alif lam or tanween. And rule number three, mudaf ilayh is a role that falls under the state of jar. And therefore, mu'minin afwan, is reflecting its jar with a kasra. Alright. With that, we covered our exercises from yesterday. Now, moving on, what we're going to do today is we're going to take certain portions from the book دروس اللغة العربية, written by Dr. Abdul Rahim, Allah have mercy upon him, and we're going to read through a few lessons. دروس اللغة العربية is a book that's taught worldwide, and it's a good book. It's a good book to teach basic grammar and speaking. However, we haven't incorporated it in its entirety in the course because it's a very long book, 3 volumes, and because traditionally speaking, Nahwu and stuff was taught differently. This is a book that's meant to teach everything in one go, meaning it teaches how to speak, it teaches rules of grammar, it teaches rules of sarf, etc., etc. And they're all scattered about throughout 3 volumes. That's not how Arabic was taught traditionally. And for our course, we've kept many traditional books in the course, along with teaching, along with teaching um, the rules of Nahwu and sarf. So they're going to be taught traditionally, bi'idhnillah. But we can take benefit from this book. How do we benefit from this book? Although we won't teach the book in its entirety, we'll have a few lessons in the beginning where we take apart lessons in this book, just the text itself, in order to understand and apply certain concepts. Because in terms of creating vocabulary, like a base for vocab, the book's really good. In terms of creating a base of vocabulary, the book is quite good. It's exceptional. And likewise, in terms of application of certain rules, it's very good. So that's all we're going to be taking from the book, bi'idhnillah. And like I said, it's just scattered lessons, a few lessons which the teachers will choose. We'll cover in the first module, bi'idhnillah. And from the second module, you'll be content to begin with Qasasun Nabiyyin. And that book will have a lot more application than Durusul Lugha, especially in the method in which you plan on teaching it, bi'idhnillah. So now we'll take a few lessons from a lesson, Darsul Rabi', lesson 4. And like I said, we only focus on two aspects. Number one is some new vocabulary, which we'll come across. I do want you to keep that in mind. And the second aspect I want you to focus on is what I've taught you previously, al-jar wal-majroor and mudaf ilayh. You don't need to worry about anything else. Okay? الدرس الرابع means the fourth lesson. And even in terms of vocab, you only have to memorize the vocabulary that's going to be in the vocab list by the end of this lesson. That's what you have to be aware of. الدرس الرابع is the fourth lesson. البيت في البيت. He just explained to you how jar majrur works. المسجد the masjid في المسجد in the masjid. المكتب مكتب means desk. مكتب means desk. So perhaps you haven't come across that yet, but that's what مكتب means. على المكتب on the desk. السرير means the bed. على السرير means on the bed. Now you'll notice over here that the alif lam has entered upon sarir and therefore it's specific. It's not just any bed, it's the bed. Number two, on that word as-sariru, ala entered. Ala is a harful jar, just like fi is a harful jar, just like bin is a harful jar, just like ila is a harful jar. And therefore, ala is a harful jar, and hence the upcoming word as-sariri is the majroor, and that majroor falls under the position of jar, and jar is reflected by a kasra, as we've taught previously. Okay. Now he brings a few words for us to practice this. Aina Muhammadun. Aina means where. It's used for questioning. It means where. Aina Muhammadun. Where is Muhammad? So you answer Huwa fil ghurfati. Now, even though I haven't taught you Huwa separately, you do know what Huwa means, right? Because I taught you that there's in Nasara there's a hidden Huwa. And I told you that Nasara means he one man. So Huwa means he one man. You're not going to translate this as he one man is in the room. You should say Huwa, he is fil ghurfati in the room. Notice he left this ending empty because he wants you to add it on. Al ghurfa means okay, room. He is in the room. He is harf al jar or jar. Al ghurfat is majur, and majur is a role that falls under the position of jar, and jar is often reflected by a kasra. Wa ayna yasirun? And where is Yasir? He replies, Huwa fil hammami. Huwa fil hammami. He is in the bathroom, you can say. Okay, he is in the bathroom. Al hammam means the bathroom. Once again, apply fi is jar. Al hammam is majur, which falls under the position of jar, and hence you see a kasra, which is a reflection of the state of or the position of jar. Wa aina aminatu? And where is Amina? Now over here, notice in the first two questions, you're speaking with a male, Muhammad and Yasir. That's why you said huwa, because huwa is used for the mudhakkar, the masculine. When you're speaking about Amin, you're not going to say huwa, you're going to say hiya, because then you're speaking about a female. Wa aina aminatu? And where is Amina? Hiya fil matbakhi. هي في المطبخ. She is in the kitchen. So في is a حرف الجر. المطبخ is major, which falls under the position of jar, which is reflected by a كسرة. هي, she is في in المطبخ, the kitchen. You'll notice one more thing when I'm reading the last حركة. I'm reading the last حركة. هو في الغرفة. هو في الحمام. هي في المطبخ. So generally speaking, Arabs don't read the last حركة. Normally they wouldn't read the last حركة. But right now, reading the last حركة is extremely important for yourself. Why is reading the last حركة important for yourself right now? Because I told you the meaning in the Arabic language is hidden in the last haraka. As of now, I want you to read the last haraka. And then later on, once you become fluent in reading Arabic, you can drop the last haraka. But for now, you need to read the last haraka whenever you read. أين الكتاب? Where is the book? هو على المكتب. It is on the desk. Now, notice over here to refer to al-kitab, we use the masculine pronoun. هو على المكتب. وأين الساعة? الساعة means the watch. And where is the watch? هي على السرير. It is on the bed. To refer to a sa'a, we use the feminine. Why? Because al-kitab is masculine. How do you know al-kitab is masculine? The lack of the round ta. Remember I told you the sign of femininity is the round ta? There's no round ta at the end of al-kitab. But there is a round ta at the end of a sa'a. So that's why we use the feminine to refer back to sa'a. Hiya ala sariri, it is on the bed. Now obviously when you're referring to a watch, you don't say he or she. You'd say it. So hiya ala sariri, it is on the bed. As-sariri is coming after harful jar. Ala is the jar, and therefore as-sariri is majur. That role of majur falls in the position of jar, and jar is often reflected by a kasra. All right. Now we're not going to answer the questions. We'll simply move on to um, lesson 5, in which you're going to practice mudaf mudaf ilay. Again, my purpose from this book is just to apply what you've learned and to learn a few new words in terms of vocabulary. So in this previous lesson, we covered a few new words. We covered al-maktab, which means the desk. We covered al-hammam, which means the washroom. We covered as-sa'a, which means the watch. We covered as-sarir, which means the bed. We covered al-matbakh, which means the kitchen. And we covered a few of these words. Just keep those words in mind, bi'idhnillah. In the fifth lesson, he teaches the mudaf mudaf ilayh combination. And in order to teach this, he has a dialogue. There's like a dialogue going on. Sa'id says, Akitabu Muhammadin hadha. Is for questioning. I told you before, is for questioning, right? That's why you have a question mark at the end. Kitabu Muhammadin, you've come across that phrase. It means book of Muhammad, mudaf mudaf ilayh. Kitab is mudaf, Muhammadin is mudaf ilayh. You've learned this phrase, right? How do you know it's mudaf mudaf ilayh? Book of Muhammad. So translation wise, it's mudaf mudaf ilayh. And beyond the translation, you also keep in mind that kitabu over here is coming first. Muhammadin is coming second. So rule number one is fulfilled. Rule number two, mudaf can have alif lam or tanween. Kitabu doesn't have alif lam or tanween. And rule number three, mudaf ilay is in a rule that falls under the position of jar. And jar is reflected by a kasra. Akitabu Muhammadin hada. Is this the book of Muhammad? Ya yasiru. Ya means oh. Ya means oh. If you want to call it to someone, you say ya. So ya Muhammad, oh Muhammad. Ya Dawood, oh Dawood. Ya Fulan, oh so and so. Ya, oh Yasiru, Yasir. Is this the book of Muhammad, oh Yasir? Yasir replies, La, no. هذا, this is كتاب محمد, the book of Hamid. عفوا. هذا means this. هذا, this is كتاب حامد, the book of Hamid. So once again, we have a mudaf mudaf ilayh structure over here. هذا means this. كتاب حامد means the book of Hamid. We're going to apply the rules of mudaf mudaf ilayh. Number one, what's the possessed? What's the mudaf? The book is the possessed, and Hamid is the possessor because the book belongs to Hamid. Number two, or now we're actually going to apply the rules. Rule number one, mudaf comes first, mudaf ilayh comes second. So over here, kitab comes first, mudaf ilayh, Hamid comes second. Rule number two, mudaf can have alif lam or tanween. Kitab does not have alif lam or tanween. That's why it's not hada kitabun. It's hada kitabu. And rule number three, mudaf ilayh is in the position of jar. That rule falls in the position of jar. And that's why Hamidin is reflecting his jar through a kasrah. Okay. لا no هذا this is كتاب محمد the book of Hamid sorry هذا كتاب حامد this is the book of Hamid أين كتاب محمد where is the book of Muhammad remember we said أين means where أين كتاب محمد where is the book of Muhammad هو it is على المكتب on the desk هناك over there هناك means over there هو it is i.e. the book على المكتب on the desk هناك over there so what does المكتب mean it means desk what is على على is a حرف الجر so we have a jar majrur phrase we have a jar majrur phrase على is a حرف الجر المكتبي because it's the ism that's coming after the حرف الجر we see this is majrur and the majrur is a role that falls under the position of jar and jar is reflected by a kasrah. Very simple and very easy. هو it is على المكتب on the desk هناك over there. أين دفتر عمار? دفتر, this is a new word. دفتر means copy, like notebook. دفتر means notebook. So أين دفتر عمار? Where is the notebook of عمار? Once again, what's this phrase in front of us? دفتر عمار. Don't say this is حرف الجر. Don't say this is jar majrur. Sometimes students they see the kasra over here and they just assume it's jar majrur. No, think about it. دفتر, notebook of Ammar. Ammar's notebook. That's a possessive phrase. It's a mudaf mudaf ilayh. And beyond that, daftaru is not a harf al-jar. Daftaru, we told you harf al-jar what? Ala, min, fi, ila. If you don't see ala, min, fi, ila right now, I don't want you to think this is a harf al-jar. هو على أين دفتر عمار? Where is the notebook of Ammar? So let's apply the rules of mudaf mudaf ilayh. Number one, whenever you apply the rules, before you actually begin applying the rules, you have to determine what's the possessed, what's the mudaf, and what's the possessor, what's the mudaf ilayh. So daftar, notebook, belongs to Ammar. Therefore, daftar is mudaf, Ammar is mudaf ilayh. Rule number one, mudaf comes first, mudaf ilayh comes second. That's applied. Rule number two, mudaf can have alif lam or tanween. Daftar doesn't have alif lam or tanween. And rule number three, mudaf ilayh is a rule that falls under the position of jar. And because it falls under the position of jar, it is reflected by a kasra. Yasir replies, هو على مكتب المدرس. هو على مكتب المدرس. It is on مكتب المدرس. We're going to stop at the sentence for today بإذن الله. هو على مكتب المدرس. It is on the desk of the teacher. Now this structure over here, let's take the structure down or apart in a bit more detail. هو على مكتب المدرس. على مكتب المدرس. مدرس, by the way, the كسرة on the ra, تشديد عن كسرة, ضمة عند الميم. مدرسي means teacher. المدرس is teacher, مكتب is desk. هو, it is, i.e. the notebook, is على upon مكتب المدرس, the desk of the teacher. على, we've taught you previously, is a jar. على is a jar. مكتب, that word over there, the word مكتب, okay, is the مضاف to the upcoming المدرس. مكتب is the مضاف to the upcoming مدرس. Why? Because the rules of مضاف مضاف إليه are applicable. مكتب, desk of the teacher. The desk belongs to the teacher. So مكتب is مضاف. المدرس is مضاف إليه. Rule number 1, مضاف comes first. مكتب is coming first. المدرس comes second. مضاف إليه comes second. Rule number 2, مضاف cannot have ألف لام or تنوين. So مكتب does not have ألف لام and it doesn't have تنوين. It's not مكتب. It's a single حركة. مكتب does not have ألف لام nor does it have تنوين. هو على مكتب المدرس. Rule number 2, مضاف إليه المدرس is a role from the roles of jar. It falls in the position of jar, and jar is reflected with a kasra. Now over here, al-mudarris has kasra because it's becoming مضاف إليه. But maktabi has kasra because there's ala harf al-jar before it. If you have a jar before it, maktabi will have kasra because it's majrur. Does it have tanween? Why doesn't it have tanween? Because mudaf cannot have alif lam or tanween. So it's ala maktabil mudarrisi. The fact that it's mudaf, we can't give it tanween because it's mudaf, and the upcoming word al-mudarrisi is mudaf ilay. It itself, maktab itself, is in the position of jar. And I taught you in the previous lesson that the mudaf, the possessed, can be in any position. It can be in jar, it can be in nasab, it can be in rafa'. It's the mudaf ilay that's always in the position of jar. Over here, maktabi happens to be in the position of jar. It's playing the role of majrur coming after an ala. It is playing the role of majrur coming after ala. هو على مكتب المدرس. It is on the desk of the teacher. We'll stop at this bi'idhnillah. And like I mentioned to you previously, you don't have to actually memorize this lesson per se. It's just a matter of application of the harf al-jar majrur and the mudaf ilay. So you can go over the lesson if you want. In the Rusul Lugha, you can look into lesson um, 4, the first part of lesson 4, and the first part of lesson 5. But like I mentioned, you don't need to memorize this. All you need to know is the application and the vocab. So a few words which we learned over here, we're going to add into the vocab list. So that needs to be learned. Make sure you know those words. Aside from that, all you have to take back from this lesson is jar majrur and mudaf ilay application. The new words we learned, I'm just going to go over a few of them and then we'll ensure we mention everything when we make the vocab list. We learned in the previous lesson. When we learned in the previous lesson, al-maktab means desk, al-sarir means bed, al-sa'a means watch, al-hammam means bathroom or shower, al-matbakh means kitchen, al-ghurfa means room. Again, I'm just saying the word itself, but in reality, all these words have a dha in the beginning because there's an alif lam, right? So they all have a dha in the beginning. Al-ghurfa means room, and then daftar means notebook, and al-mudarris means teacher. All these words, bi'idhnillah, we're going to add into your vocab list. You'll have a chance to memorize them. And aside from that, just keep the rules and application in mind. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.